Thanks, Mike. In 6 days, Mike Tyson re-enters the ring, surrounded as always by controversy and questions. Tonight on this live edition of Outside the Lines, we examine Tyson, the people close to him, and what prison has done to the former champion on the occasion of Tyson, the return.
I feel great. I look great. I don't think he's going to be the same fighter.
Can the youngest ever heavyweight champion recapture the awesome magic that marked his reign until 3.5 years in prison for a crime he denies committing?
They didn't know if he was supposed to be treated like every other inmate or if he was supposed to be treated like Mike Tyson.
How was he treated?
Like Mike Tyson.
His release unleashed a battle for Tyson's business and his soul. That winner and still champion, Don King, pulling the multi-million-dollar strings of the heavyweight division.
The reverberations are still shaking out, you know, that he was sticking with me. He had never left me.
I'm just a strong believer that before the end of my time, I will be betrayed by perhaps the closest people to me.
His challenges outside the ring may be greater than those inside the ropes as Mike Tyson returns. Anticipation and questions accompany Mike Tyson and those around him as he re-enters the ring. Our topic on Outside the Lines, Tyson, the return. Come Saturday night, we will know if Mike Tyson can be the fighter we remember with the ferocity, the power, and the focus of the youngest heavyweight champion in history, and whether his persona still translates into pay-per-view success. Mike Tyson has not held a championship belt for 5.5 years. Right now, most sports fans would be hard-pressed to name the reigning heavyweight champions, but everybody knows Mike Tyson and the fortunes and the furies that have marked his life. And oh, by the way, the WBA champion, Bruce Seldon, WBC champ, that's Oliver McCall. The IBF championship is vacant. A former champion returning after an involuntary absence of over 3 years. It's been 25 years since boxing has seen this with the return of Muhammad Ali. This time, the boxer had been a gifted youngster, champion by the age of 20, dethroned at the age of 23. Mike Tyson disputes the conventional wisdom that in his last 4 fights, after his loss to Buster Douglas, his ring skills had eroded. Al Bernstein considers whether Tyson's training and his entourage can help him recapture what was.
I think if he puts his mind to it, he can get it back.
Tyson trained in secret until August 2nd. On that day, he emerged looking more muscular than ever. He had maintained his conditioning in prison through calisthenics, basketball, and jogging. But he was not allowed to spar, use a heavy bag, or work on his boxing skills. He now attempts to regain those abilities while training by committee.
They're using teams of guys that are working with him. You know what I mean? It's just like, I love it when I see the Cleveland Indians where they're playing baseball right now. They've never, you know, but it didn't come from one guy. You know, they got a first base coach, they got a hitting coach, they got a pitching coach. I mean, teamwork, man.
Do you think, in effect, he's still just training himself?
I think, sure, definitely. How can you have three? How can you take? You got 3 different personalities. They all can be good guys. They all can be great trainers. Now you're gonna have 3 different theories. It's only gonna have, you know, the only plus of it is gonna be some kind of confusion. So yeah, Mike's probably still training himself.
When Mike Tyson was at his peak, these were the building blocks of his success: good head movement, repeated use of the jab, and rapid combinations. This gym in Catskill, New York, is where Mike Tyson learned his boxing skills. It's where Customato taught him a very specific kind of boxing style that would take him to the World Heavyweight Championship. But many believe that well before Mike went to prison, that style was crumbling.
I didn't see the jab in the Bruno fight. I don't care if he only threw 10 jabs when he was at his best, maybe 15 around. They were effective jabs. That was very badly missed when it was gone. He was looking now to land 1 punch.
2 fights later came Tyson's only pro loss to Buster Douglas. Again, specific punches were absent, this time along with any evidence of focus and preparation.
He didn't throw any punches because he figured, all right, well, I'll maybe look at this guy in a bad way and he'll fall down. And when that didn't happen, and the other guy, Douglas, was in pretty good shape, and he was very nervous, but he let a scared fighter get brave is what he did. And so Douglas said, all right, well, you don't want to throw, I'm going to start throwing. So he started throwing and started connecting.
Though he won his ensuing fights, Tyson continued to come out slower and less focused. It wasn't so much that his abilities had diminished, it was that he seemed unable to marshal his skills.
You have to have been practicing discipline. You have to be conditioned in that way. To me, he lost all his training and conditioning in that area by the way he was living, by having everyone around him tell him what he wanted to hear, and not having to face things that were difficult.
Since 1988, when Don King took control of Team Tyson, there's been no trainer who has had the impact or autonomy of D'Amato or Rooney. For the most part, Tyson marches to the beat of his own drummer.
So if you don't have someone you can trust in, sometimes you're lost. The advantage of having a trainer is that he can see things that you can't see. And then you go to the corner, he can explain certain things to you. And therefore, you can go out there and look for various different things, and that makes you a better fighter.
However, Tyson's training and preparation may be a moot point when he faces Peter McNeely, a journeyman fighter. Chances are this fight will not allow boxing observers to evaluate whether the vintage Tyson skills remain.
You got to see him against somebody who can say, wait a minute, you're not going to hit me because I'm going to hit you. Or you're not going to, and not only going to hit you, but I am going to hurt you.
He was champion. He punches harder than anyone around. He punched faster than any heavyweight around. So he has the physical tools. Now we have to deal with his brain.
I don't think no human can be the same after 3 years or 6 years or anything, just especially laying off. We naturally get older. I have about 6 gray hairs in my head now, where a few years ago I had just 1. So naturally we never can be like we used to be.
Tyson's comeback is reminiscent of when Muhammad Ali returned to the ring at the same age after nearly the same amount of time off. But there are stark differences.
You look at the people that Ali fought after his exile, who were waiting for him, you know, just to come back. He goes and he fights Jerry Quarry, who could punch like hell. Then he's got to fight Oscar Bonavino, who damn near knocked Joe Frazier out of the ring. And he's got to come back after that and fight Joe Frazier. Unbelievable.
An older Ali had to change his style after his layoff. He could no longer rely on his dazzling foot speed as an assurance of victory. Instead, he unveiled the granite chin and clever ploys like the rope-a-dope. No such adaptations are likely for Tyson and may not be necessary. As an aggressive, straight-ahead fighter, his mission should be to rediscover and perfect the earlier style that took him to the heavyweight championship of the world.
The parallel with Ali's comeback, differences in style notwithstanding, is striking. Tyson is actually 3 months older than Ali was at the time of Ali's return. Outside the Lines asked Muhammad Ali to compare his circumstance with Tyson's return. Ali said, quote, "I didn't feel then, nor do I feel now that I lost skill and speed during my exile. I was still young then. If you train long enough, you can bring yourself back up to the level you were. I don't think I was old enough to lose my skills as a boxer, and I don't think Mike is either." Ali on Tyson's conversion to Islam: "My strongest recommendation to Mike would be to be as sincere in following the tenets of his chosen religion, Islam, as he possibly can be. Obviously, Satan would like him to fail. If he gives in to temptation, he is a marked man. On the other hand, if he bows to his faith, he will overcome and triumph." Those are the words of Muhammad Ali on Mike Tyson. Let's now hear the words of Al Bernstein on Mike Tyson. Al, live in Las Vegas. Al, if you're watching the fight Saturday night as a fight fan, what should you look for to see if he is back?
Well, the things that Mike Tyson did very well when he was champion, and what is intrinsic in his style, he's got to make sure he jabs his way in, move his head as he's coming in, work the body more than he was in later fights, and also throw punches in combination. It's important because, unlike Ali, he's of a different physical stature and he has a different kind of fighting style. He needs to fight correctly to be effective, and even if he doesn't need it on August 19th, he'll need it later.
Last week, Jay Bright was anointed and elevated to the position of head trainer in Tyson's corner. What's going on in Mike's corner?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about the training situation is that we have 3 men in new positions. Stacy McNeely and Dave Jacobs are experienced boxing men. They've never worked a Tyson corner. Jay Bright, who's been around Tyson, has never been a head trainer. So you really have 3 men in very different positions that they have never been in that situation before. And again, whether it has an impact on August 19th, I don't know, but it surely will down the road.
Okay, Al, we'll be checking in later with you. Thanks a great deal. Tyson's return to the ring is a Don King promotion. The art of the deal in boxing blends expedience and brashness with capitalism. And Don King owns the recipe. He is seen as equal parts brilliant, infuriating, and outrageous. A one-time numbers runner who has served time for manslaughter. He has met presidents and royalty, and he has reemerged to control the heavyweight division, even as he awaits federal trial in October, charged with insurance fraud. But as John Saraceno reports, King's greatest coup may be his renewed bond with Mike Tyson in the face of competition, and reports that King has pillaged Tyson's wealth.
Don King is unquestionably the greatest con man of all time.
Don is, I mean, he is a genius in working his magic.
It's like the vampire. He's got to suck your blood. He's got to steal from you in order for him to survive.
Don King is without a doubt one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life.
Amid published reports King siphoned millions from Mike Tyson, he still managed to escort the former heavyweight champion from prison last March. Some interpreted their departure as a signal they were still a team, despite Tyson's religious conversion. It looked like King had won his 3-year skirmish against Tyson's many suitors. Within a week, Tyson made it official.
I also will confirm that Don King will continue to promote my fight. Don is the greatest promoter in the world, as we know.
You know that Don's the greatest promoter in the world, as you know. It was a resounding statement. It was a shot that was heard around the world. The reverberations are still shaking out, you know, that he was sticking with me. He had never left me.
Mike Tyson, Mike Tyson.
The King-Tyson marriage is a bond not easily undone. Years ago, the fighter told a former cornerman, "I know Don King is a thief." So why remain on King's throne? Tyson's historic dependency on others and lack of formal education leave him vulnerable to King's constant talk about loyalty, racial solidarity, and the power of money.
I mean, I think Don is psychologically brilliant. He can find the weak spot in almost anybody and exploit it. Mike likes Don personally. I think Don takes care of him. I think it would have been so difficult and complicated for him to figure out who to go to that he just drifted back to Don. And second, I think Mike has enough of the antisocial rap mentality, is that he loves the idea that Don is an outlaw, that Don is controversial. He can give the finger to the world by going back to Don.
Besides, to break off his relationship with King, Tyson would have to admit he had chosen the wrong partner.
But he says in his mind, if I go on TV and say that Don was really the guy that ripped me off, Mike would rather die, which he's doing. He'd rather go this way and just die. He'd rather spend 3 years in jail than have to say, I made a mistake.
King seized upon Tyson's imprisonment to further his cause after the relationship seemed in jeopardy for years.
What happened is God gave me an opportunity to demonstrate what I would have never been able to demonstrate had he not fallen. He got a chance to find out about me, and I got a chance to find out about him.
With Tyson's cash reserves nearly depleted, sources say King used sizable sums of cash to keep the fighter comfortable in prison. To fellow inmates, Tyson seemed satisfied with King.
He felt like Don King was it. And Don King's his man, and that's what it was. I mean, he wasn't gonna let go of Don King for nothing. He knew Don King was the man to get him going again.
But with rival promoters circling in an effort to woo the fighter, King still needed to close the deal with Tyson after his release.
Don will do whatever it takes. I mean, there's no line that DK won't cross in order to deliver.
He'll get on his knees, he'll get naked, he'll crawl on the floor. The name of the game is to get the deal.
In the hours preceding Tyson's announcement of his comeback plan, King allegedly pleaded with the fighter. A source says King had tears in his eyes as he begged Tyson to remain loyal, also giving him cash to secure the deal. Murad Muhammad, who is suing his former promotional partner, is well acquainted with King's persuasiveness.
He blinds you with the cash up front. So It's evident that he went to Mike Tyson with cash. He didn't come there just talking. The old saying, the money on the wood make the betting go good. He put the money down on the wood. You understand? And he gambled and he betted on Mike and he won.
Did you spend that night before the press conference trying to convince Mike to stay with you, Don?
No, it was nothing to convince him about. I mean, this is, again, the wishful thinking for those who would say that this, that, another happened, but it's time now that the American public should be brought to the awareness that they were all lies, unadulterated, unmitigated lies.
Do you ever lie?
You know, I think Benjamin Franklin called it the art of persuasion. You know, so, you know, I would like to take Ben's high road, you know what I mean? You know, to be just an outright prevaricator, no. But to art of persuasion, yes.
He is uninhibited by truth or consistency. He'll say whatever fits the moment, and he is, which is what makes him such a world-class confidence man, is that he is very likable and he's very believable while he's lying.
Don, how would you characterize your relationship with Mike right now?
I would characterize our relationship as being friends, buddies, comrades. So, you know, we are friends. We got a business arrangement that emanates from our friendship. Without the friendship, he wouldn't be doing business.
Yet, Tyson was recently quoted as saying he and King are not great friends, only business partners. Whatever the case, King says he's already answered his critics.
I got Tyson, and I got all 3 belts. I mean, that's a hell of a response, you know what I mean?
Even without Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe, Don King is the gatekeeper to the heavyweight championship, all 3 of them. John Saraceno joins us tonight live from Las Vegas. John, Don King has a trial early October, New York Federal Court, Southern District. If he goes down, is convicted, and it's a big if, what could happen to the King-Tyson relationship?
Bob, it really depends on the contract language Don King has with Mike Tyson, because King is certain to lose his promoter's license throughout the country. If Mike Tyson decides he wants Don King out for whatever reason, and we've been hearing that for months and months, that the relationship is still rocky, I'm told by legal experts that Tyson could have an out with Don King in prison.
Of course, it depends on how that contract was written. And to further speculate, should King go down, is it possible he could still be pulling some strings and running his empire from behind bars?
Certainly, if Don lost his promoter's license, he could set up another promoter and run the enterprise from prison. As we well know, many businesses have been run out of the tank before.
All right, John, thanks. And again, Don King, like every American, innocent until proven guilty, and that trial begins in early October. John will be checking in with you a little bit later on. As we continue on this live edition tonight of Outside the Lines, tonight we will meet the people behind Mike Tyson and explore their stake in Tyson's return to the ring. Also ahead tonight, men who served time with Mike Tyson on just how those 3 years inside went down. And next, Mike Tyson in his own words.
They want to see me self-destruct. They want to see me one day with handcuffs and walking in the police cars, going to jail like you seen Marlon Brando's son. People they love seeing and saying, look, this is what I told you. I told you he's headed for that. I told you he's headed for that.
Outside the Lines is brought to you by MCI Friends and Family. Only Friends and Family gives half-price calling.
Listen to Mike Tyson, and you hear a man who professes a keen sense of self and a pragmatic view of his violent profession. We attempted to talk with Mike Tyson for this program. After discussions with his representatives over several tentative dates, Outside the Lines was offered an interview with Tyson after this evening. So, tonight, Mike Tyson from his teenage days under Customato to the present, a free man again, the man who would be champion.
I'm involved with a sport that I love, but it doesn't love me.
To describe my personality is somewhat, I could say, bizarre, because you haven't seen many of my fights go the distance. But to express myself and explain, Mike Tyson is actually just a cold, business-like killer. That's the way to be described.
People ask me, and it's weird because people say, are you violent? You know what I mean? They make that statement all the time, thinking that I go on ramp. I'm very violent, you know what I mean? Because that's the line of my job. The line of my job is very violent, and that's just the way I am as an individual as far as my occupation is concerned. They never told me I'm going to be the champ. They said, You have the potential. Everyone could, a lot of heavyweights out there have potential. A lot of them could punch. Every big man, I guess, can punch. But if you don't dedicate and put every ounce and every concentration into it, there's no way that you could accomplish. There were perhaps fighters greater than me, turn of the century, that never had the chance because of their discipline. And if it could happen to them, I'm Mike Tyson, it could happen to me too. I don't consider myself a superstar. And like the money that I make, that you talk about the big allowance, I bled for that money and everything I got, and I don't part with it easy. And I'm enjoying myself as a 19-year-old boy. Everybody's going around saying, he's just a boy, he's just a boy. But I'm going to be the only boy to be king of the world. There's never any doubts in my mind because I'm the best in the world. Even though a lot of you don't like to hear it, it's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. You're taught if you work hard, you're going to be successful, but no one teaches you how to handle it. You know, you're just not taught how to handle success. Because there's no reason. You must spoil yourself once you're successful. You owe it to yourself to spoil yourself. Sometimes it gets out of hand. And when you're young, you know what I mean? A young person has to live. You want to live. I think about my experience with the press. You know what I mean? We make the monsters. You know what I mean? We create the monsters that we are. You know what I mean? Directly or indirectly. Somehow we do it. I mean, so we have no one to blame for ourselves. You know what I mean? I can't feel sorry, and I can't expect anyone to feel sorry for me. Because whatever happened in my life, you know what I mean, more or less, I created it.
How much has your newly found religion motivated you to once again become the undisputed heavyweight champion?
If you wish to ask me any more questions, if you wish for me to stay here, you're going to only ask me questions that concern boxing, if you don't mind. I don't mean to sound like I'm being abrupt to you, but that's what I prefer, because that's what I'm here for. If you don't mind, brother. Thank you. A lot of people want to see, they want to see me self-destruct. They want to see me one day with handcuffs and walking in the police cars, going to jail, like you seen Marlon Brando's son. People, they love seeing, look, this is what I told you. I told you he's headed for that. I told you he's headed for that.
If Desiree Washington were here, would you have any message to her who's now suffering through rape and watching you earn millions?
And just enjoy the fight.
When Outside the Lines continues, we have the story of the men closest to Mike Tyson. They managed his career, and they shaped the multi-million-dollar decisions that echo throughout the industry. Still ahead, if you've got the letters, they've got a belt for it. The anarchy of boxing's governing bodies.
There is absolutely nothing you can say in defense of these groups. They serve no purpose. And when I say no purpose, I mean zero purpose.
Also ahead, Tyson in prison. Men who did time with the former champ describe how he was treated and what he talked about on the inside. And next, Team Tyson. The men who have emerged to direct and some say control boxing's best-known fighter. It's called Team Tyson, the close group of men who accompany, work with, and some would say influence the former heavyweight champion. Specifically, two men, John Horne and Rory Holloway. But as Armin Katayan reports, the shadow and the influence of Don King falls heavily on these men who are closest to the most famous boxer in the ring today.
And I applaud the team, which is John Horne and...
They are boxing's odd couple, the human bookends of Mike Tyson's life. A Don King disciple on one side, the loyal best friend on the other. Together they stand as gatekeepers to a $50 million man, a fighter who flexed their muscle at his first post-prison speech.
And I want to confirm John Horne and Rory Holloway as my managers. And besides being my closest friends for many years, John and Rory has given me great advice in my professional career.
33-year-old Rory Holloway has been tight with Tyson since his days as an amateur champion.
And I'd like to say hello to all my family back home and to once more my dearest friend Rory Holloway back in Albany, New York.
Today he manages the personal side of the boxer's life, from wake-up calls to sparring partners.
You know, I basically oversee the whole camp. I'm in charge of Mike Tyson's whole training camp.
34-year-old John Kennedy Horne arrived on the scene about 8 years ago. Today he handles the other side of Tyson's life, in concert with King.
I usually work very closely with Don in negotiating with Mike's business affairs.
This is one of my crowning achievements. When you want to see me beam with joy, when you talk about Horne and you talk about Holloway,
Publicly, Tyson's millionaire co-managers have been heavily criticized as walking conflicts of interest. Puppets on a string for King.
That is a joke. Anyone who knows boxing knows that. But they don't do anything for Mike, just to protect him for Don King.
I think Roy operates today out of ignorance. John, on the other hand, is a strange man, a very strange man. And he operates on the thinking of Don King.
Horne declined to be interviewed by Outside the Lines, while Holloway responded to the critics like this.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and try to justify what John and I are doing or what Don King is doing. Don King is a tremendous part of this puzzle.
Two pieces of the Team Tyson puzzle first fit together here at Albany High School in upstate New York, where Holloway was a shy student who dreamed of playing in the NBA.
He was very quiet, unassuming. I remember that the girls were all crazy about Rory.
Horne graduated 2 years ahead of Holloway. His moniker was Mr. Clean, his senior yearbook foretelling the fortunes of an ambitious young man.
John was always, how I put it nicely, a hustler, okay? He always, John was always trying to think of a better way to do something, okay? Maybe not the way it was supposed to be done, but he was, like he is now, he's pretty slick.
John could probably, I don't say con his way, but he can talk his way into anything.
In the mid-1980s, Horne honed his gift for gab at this comedy club in Los Angeles. Eventually, he ran into Holloway, then on the rise with Tyson, and made a critical connection to King. According to a source who worked here in King's New York office, Horne was paid $5,000 in consultant fees by the promoter on several occasions in 1987 and early '88. That was well before Tyson signed a promotional deal with King, and Horne became 1/3 of Team Tyson. King says his motive for paying out money was never to make inroads with Tyson, but empower young blacks.
Did I ever help John Horne? Yes. Did I ever help Roy Holloway? Yes. When I took Horne and Holloway, they were just two buddies of Mike Tyson. I took them to the University of the Ghetto, the School of Hard Knocks and Broken Dreams. And now they've graduated, they got their degree, summa cum laude, and they're going about their business.
Former Tyson chauffeur Rudy Gonzalez has written a book about his 4+ years inside what he calls the inner ring. Gonzalez claims Horne learned his lessons all too well from King.
He became Don King's disciple, but he used Rory Holloway's friendship as a lure.
When I first saw him, Tyson told me, watch that guy, he's no good, in Horne. So he knew what was going on and who were trying to get into his situation.
So during the course of this celebrated comeback, the question for Team Tyson remains. Are these human bookends in place for a boxer's benefit, or to just box him in for King?
You know, I don't think I have to sit here and articulate what qualified me to be Mike's manager. You know what I mean? Just as well I don't sit here and justify me being Mike's friend.
Friendship, trust, and loyalty. Words Tyson's time behind bars helped put into place.
You know, I'm just a strong believer that before the end of my time, I will be betrayed by perhaps the closest people to me, because from my experience, I know the best of friends show also part as well.
Recently, Tyson was asked by Outside the Lines to explain what he meant by that remark.
If I'm prepared and somebody tries to betray me, I'm no longer betrayed, but I'm always prepared to be betrayed.
And by the people closest to you, the people that are close to you now, or just anyone in the future?
Anyone in general. My main objective is God and myself and family. I love them and they love me, but I know human nature and I know what people are capable of doing because of the human nature. I don't judge people for what they are, I judge them for what they actually are. For what you are. Thank you.
Mike Tyson's return is viewed by many through the prism of his 3 years as an inmate. As we continue on Outside the Lines, next up, a vivid sense of what life on the inside was like for Mike Tyson from the men who served time with him. The boxing landscape was sculpted by the absence of Mike Tyson. The former champion spent 3 years in prison for a sexual assault he still maintains he did not commit. Charlie Steiner reports now. While the Mike Tyson who emerged seems like a changed man, the Mike Tyson on the inside was not just another inmate.
It was April 15th, 1992, when the then former heavyweight champion of the world, Mike Tyson, was delivered here to the Indiana Youth Center. He walked through this door to begin serving a 3-year term as prisoner 922-335.
Everybody talked about it was chaotic, really, because the administration didn't know how to handle him being there.
We had absolutely no idea what to expect from him.
They didn't know if he was supposed to be treated like every other inmate or if he was supposed to be treated like Mike Tyson.
We had a few officers who would go out of their way to find fault with him. We're a little cautious about who we assigned to those dormitories where he was living. They pretty much treated him fairly.
How was he treated?
Like Mike Tyson.
He had a lot more phone privileges, visiting time, certain privileges that could be known and was known, he had more of.
We had visiting lists. He had, you know, however many visits he wanted.
Tyson had the cash. Anything Mr. Tyson would have wanted, he could have gotten.
There was a lot of things that went on that, as far as him getting his special privileges, no one really minded.
Because Mike Tyson was the most famous prison inmate in the state of Indiana. And that was a double-edged sword. Because would someone dare challenge the former heavyweight champion of the world? That at first made Tyson fearful.
I think when he first got there, he was, because people were hollering things out the window.
We thought there would be problems with other offenders and him.
And they knew how famous they could become if they hit Mike Tyson. So I'm sure he walked around with fear in the back of his mind every single day.
But aside from a skirmish with a guard in the first few weeks of his stay, there was no evidence of any Tyson trouble in prison.
Obviously, he's a very charismatic person. Really does have an aura about him. I think he realizes this, that he has this power over people, and would use that occasionally, I think, in his dealings with other staff and offenders.
How so?
If somebody, a glare, just the coldness that he was able to emote was enough to keep most people from almost like, a rattlesnake can really hurt you, and that rattlesnake doesn't have to do very much.
While Tyson remained mostly a loner, he did open up a little bit to a few inmates.
He was a down-to-earth person that came from the streets. He just got a break because he was able to fight. And that's basically how we seen it. He wasn't arrogant or none of that.
I thought he'd have a total different attitude than what he had. I thought he'd have a pissed-off attitude, like, get away from me. And it wasn't like that at all. He was down to earth. And that's what really surprised me.
Blacks, whites, it didn't matter. I mean, if you just wanted to sit down, talk to him, look at his pictures or whatever, it was cool. But if you was coming at him trying to run some kind of con or something, then that's when he would have a problem.
But Tyson would have no problem greeting his jet-set visitors.
Don King,
Spike Lee,
Marshall Falk,
Charles Oakley,
Pepper from Salt & Pepper,
Whitney Houston,
Chris Webber,
Roberto Duran,
Tupac came down,
Riddick Bowe was here.
But by most accounts, Tyson generally kept to himself and became a voracious reader.
Muhammad is the messenger of Allah.
And studied Islam under Muhammad Sadiq. How devout is Mike Tyson?
Mike is as much Muslim as any Muslim on the planet Earth.
Well, I don't think it's a religious aspect at all, Charlie. I think what it is a study in human beings, a study in life and living.
Everybody talks about his lack of intelligence. But if you was to ask Mike anything about history, he could answer it for you. See, because he didn't become a full Muslim. He was just studying their beliefs. And that's what he was doing. He was learning about it.
Throughout his 3 years in prison, and to this day, Mike Tyson maintains he was wrongfully convicted of rape.
He's like, he didn't do it. He was adamant about that. He did not do it. It's just his method of being with females was a little different than, I guess, what her past had been. He was just a little bit more aggressive. But no, he adamant about he did not rape her.
he felt like he had been done wrong.
By whom?
By the justice system.
Mike would say, you know, Sadiq, I didn't do what they accused me of. He said, but I did so many other things that they didn't know anything about. He said, this is probably God punishing me for some of those other things.
By most accounts, Tyson matured and mellowed in his 3 years in prison.
I think I saw a broadening of interest in lots of things that he had probably not had the time to really devote himself to.
I think he grew up more. The religion probably helped him grow up more, see more what life is, what's out there in life. So he was just, the impression I get is that he was just living day by day. What, you know, this day, this day, this day. Now he's looking more along the lines of the future.
Mike Tyson, tonight a free man in Vegas. Charlie Steiner joins us from Las Vegas live, where the spiked hairline of Don King dominates the horizon as it did during Tyson's time in prison. Charlie, let me ask you, Mike Tyson had a lot of time in prison to think about his relationship with Don King, and still he stayed with DK.
By all indications, Bob, there was never really any wavering on that issue. The inmates that we talked to and some of the other people in and around the Indiana Youth Center all said that Don King and Mike Tyson were solid, and that, in fact, one of the inmates suggested to me that Don King was almost a father figure to Mike Tyson.
What about the relationships that Tyson formed with other inmates while he was in for 3 years?
Well, he stayed to himself for the most part. He would come out, and where there was some socializing was in the recreation center, where, in fact, he was the manager of the recreation center and the manager of the prison basketball team, in fact.
I am fascinated by the comment that his imam, his Islamic minister, Muhammad Sadiq, made. What did you make of that?
Well, you know, it was one of those situations where Sadiq was his teacher, and they clearly had established a very solid relationship. Sadiq, in fact, saw Mike Tyson more than anybody else over the course of his 3-year period. And I was fascinated, as you were, to hear his comment that Mike Tyson, in essence, admitted to him there were other things he got away with, but the rape of Desiree Washington was something he did not do.
As we mentioned earlier, we attempted to speak with Mike Tyson for this program. We're unable to come to a mutually agreeable date. You have spent a great deal of time, though, with Mike in the past. Do you think he's a changed man since he's left prison?
If you'll pardon the expression, the jury is out. We really have not had a chance to see him or talk to him, but clearly all of the people with whom he surrounds himself, John Horne, Rory Holloway, Don King, the cast remains the same.
Okay, Charlie, thanks. We'll be speaking with you a little bit later in this program. And there is precious little humor in the story of Mike Tyson's career, but there is plenty of humor in considering the seemingly infinite number of boxing organizations crowning an equal number of champs. That's next.
I would be very cynical. I could see people starting to think it went into the realm of wrestling.
Saturday night's fight is a non-title bout for Mike Tyson. There's no championship at stake, which actually makes it a bit of a rarity. Seems like every time two boxers enter the ring, there's a championship belt up for grabs. As Keith Olbermann tells us, there are nearly as many sanctioning bodies as letters in the alphabet.
In the first 92 years of the heavyweight boxing division, there was a pure, clear, and simple method to determining a champion. The man who beat the man, who beat the man, who beat the man, who beat the man, who was the champ, was the champ. And on February 15th, 1978, Leon Spinks defeated heavyweight champ Muhammad Ali and became the champ. And shortly thereafter, the World Boxing Council stripped Spinks of its title because he granted Ali a rematch. Furthermore, the WBC bestowed the belt on Don King's fighter, Ken Norton. And so, there were two champions. And those were the good old days. Two sanctioning bodies, two champions.
You walk down the street and you say, who's the heavyweight champion? Well, you can't say that right now.
Up until a week ago, it was Riddick Bowe, and he vacated the title.
The current WBA heavyweight champion is Bruce Seldon.
George Foreman recently relinquished the title, so it's currently vacant.
It really tells you there is no heavyweight champion in the world.
I could see people starting to think it went into the realm of wrestling.
If you eat a cereal consisting of small, sugar-coated, starchy letters in a bowl like this one, your odds of actually ingesting the identifying initials or acronym of an organizing boxing body have increased in the last 15 years from 16,536 to 1 to 4,134 to 1. That's an increase in probability of 400%.
It's just like your churches.
The word world is sacred.
When people get angry with a minister over here, they form a new church over there, you know? And that's the same thing that you have in boxing.
If the world does not allow the others to use that word, that is a sin. That's a mortal sin.
The moral or religious implications aside, the alphabet syndrome certainly diminished the meaning of the heavyweight crown. From 1882 to 1978, there were 28 champions. Since Mike Tyson's imprisonment, 20 fighters have claimed at least a part of somebody's world heavyweight crown.
It's terrible. It's embarrassing, confusing.
Usually, the first 5 in the sanctioning bodies are the same.
There is a formula for the rankings.
It's when you get after 5 that you get a little bit fuzzy.
Actually, fuzzy is an interesting way to describe the ratings. Boxing Illustrated, a magazine with no stake in the matchmaking business, ranks Riddick Bowe #1. In the top 10 lists of the 3 oldest sanctioning bodies, the WBA, WBC, and IBF, there are 19 different fighters in the 30 available spots, and none of them is Riddick Bowe. Alphabets, anyone?
There is absolutely nothing you can say in defense of these groups. They serve no purpose. And when I say no purpose, I mean zero purpose.
And so, Tyson returns. And so excited are the sanctioning bodies that he's already had an impact on their systematically deduced rankings.
The WBA has ranked Mike Tyson #1 upon his release from prison.
Our obligation is to give to the people of the world and give to the boxing fans of the world what the boxing fans of the world want, and they want Tyson.
And kids, one bowl full of boxing provides you with more than 100% of the recommended daily requirement of amusement and rationalization. In our edition of Outside the Lines, we'll spirit you right back to Las Vegas momentarily. We'll check in with Charlie, Al, and John on the big fight and Mike Tyson. 5 nights before Tyson's return. 5.5 years since he last wore a championship belt. We call in our band of reporters live from Las Vegas. Charlie Steiner, Al Bernstein, John Saraceno. Al, you live in Vegas. Let me ask you, is this just another fight? Has it become a quote-unquote event yet?
Well, you know, my take on this is that a lot of people are very interested in this fight. I go around the country and everybody asks me about it. They're talking about it here in Las Vegas. However, I think the question of whether it's a mega event will be answered by not only whether all the seats are filled in the MGM, but also whether there are many, many, many people that buy the pay-per-view, and both those questions are unanswered.
It is more an event than it is a fight.
That's true.
I don't think there's anybody in Las Vegas who thinks McNeely is going to last past 2 rounds. Most people are thinking 1 round, and certainly significantly less than that. In fact, today I heard a couple of writers talking back and forth, and it sounded as if it was Name That Tune. One guy said, Tyson will knock out McNeely in 6 punches, and the other guy said, I can name it in 5.
It's tough to find an over-under in the sports books. John, let me ask you this. The object, obviously, for Tyson, become champion again. His route to the championship in the mid-'80s and here in the mid-'90s. How are they different?
Well, he's got a much tougher path, Bob. He's not going to be facing Bone Crusher Smith, Pinklin Thomas, Trevor Berbick, guys who were over the hill and essentially washed up. He's got to fight guys like Riddick Bowe, Michael Moore, Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, guys that are hungry and guys who think that Mike Tyson has a chink in his armor.
There is one significant difference here, John, and that is the 3 heavyweight champions as we know them now, McCall, Selden, and the winner of both the Schultz fight, will be Don King fighters. So the fact of the matter is he may get to that title more easily because they're certainly not the caliber of fighters that you just mentioned, but until, as you pointed out as we were talking off air, until he is able to beat one of those name fighters, it's not going to happen.
Al, let me ask you about Mike Tyson, the fighter. You have analyzed styles. Let's talk about, though, from the neck up. Emmanuel Stewart, for example, has been quoted as saying that Tyson's style and approach is for the short haul. Mentally, what is the approach he needs to take beyond just this one fight through to November and beyond?
Well, you know, people have criticized his preparations here. They've said he was trained in private, which I think was a good idea. I wouldn't have let him be trained in front of the press either. Whatever you want to say about the people training him, the people managing him, the bottom line is he is in very good physical condition, and to me, he looks very focused.
Right, Al, but that's going to be enough for Peter McNeely, a guy who, in his last fight, fought a guy with 63 professional losses, if you can believe that. But what happens after Peter McNeely gets boiled like a New England lobster? I mean, Mike Tyson has got to retain those skills that he once had. To do that, he's going to need a top-flight trainer, and also, Mike was a very programmed fighter. He had to have things repetitively drummed into him. He hasn't had that for years, so it remains to be seen.
Let me go around quickly one time, then around the table, guys, and start with you, Charlie, and get a pick from everybody. How long does this go? Minutes, seconds, rounds?
The Mendoza line in baseball is 200. The Mendoza line in boxing is 91 seconds, the time it took for Tyson to knock out Michael Spinks. It'll be right around the Mendoza line in boxing.
I think it's going to go into the second round, deep into the second round, because I think Tyson is going to be a little off, and I think Peter McNeely will take some of those shots. End of the second round.
No way, Al. Forget about the proposition in Vegas, over-under with the rounds. This fight lasts less than 60 seconds.
Okay, well, we'll see you on Saturday night. Thanks, guys, live tonight from Las Vegas. We will have a final word on Outside the Lines. Don't go away.
Outside the Lines is brought to you by Toyota and their full line of quality cars and trucks. Toyota, I love what you do for me.
Mike Tyson fights for Don King. King has the 2 reigning heavyweight champs, meaning Tyson has an inside track when the economics permit to fight for a belt again, and soon. The controversy, the excitement, the revulsion over Tyson's return is a perfect promotion for the sport that has always walked on sport's wild side. For Outside the Lines, I'm Bob Lake.